I just wanted to run away and get away from that lifestyle as much as possible because deep in my heart, I've always wanted to do something good. I always wanted to be a good dad, a good husband. I always wanted to have that picture family, or I guess that family picture that you see in Walmart. I always wanted to have that family. I couldn't do that out there. I still got homos that are out there that are in their 40s that are still doing the same damn thing. And I tell myself, why? There's more to life than just staying in the hood and being respected by the hood.
Welcome to another episode of More Than Just a Story podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and make sure you turn on the notifications to it will notify you whenever we upload another video. Today we have a very special guest. Welcome.
Hey Diana,
How are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank y'all for allowing me to be here with you
Thank you
guys.
for accepting our invite. I know
Appreciate
we've
it.
been trying to schedule it for a long time and
Yeah, I
we
know.
finally got it done. All right,
Thank
well,
you guys.
tell me a little bit about who is.
Let me see. From how far are you trying to go back, or
You were
just
born.
all right? Well, I guess I'm originally from DFW. I'm currently living out in West Texas by Odessa and Midland, but I grew up out there in DFW, born in Dallas, raised in Fort Worth. Spent like the last 10, 12 years out in North Arlington. So my family is originally from that area. My dad's family from Dallas. My mom's is from Fort Worth, and that's where they had me at. Was in Dallas, and eventually made my way to Fort Worth. So my mom, she is a great woman. Dad got locked up when I was 6 years old, and he's still in there in the past 25 years. I've probably seen him twice, maybe, and he's been in there going on 30 years now. So I come from a really broken home and not having a good dad in the picture. My mom, she always tried her hardest to make sure that our lights were turned on. We had food on the table, but we still grew up, poor. A stepdad did come in the picture later on when I was maybe like 6 years old, but he was more of a big brother to me. He wasn't really a good father figure. He was more of a I guess he put that backbone in me because prior to my stepdad coming in, which to this day, when I talk about him, I still refer to him as my dad or my pops because he's pretty much raised me for like 12, 13 years of my life. So he came in the picture, and prior to that, I was more of a like a titty baby or a mama's boy, just really, attached to my mom, really, soft. And he came in the picture and he kind of put the backbone in me, taught me how to be tough. I guess he taught me how to be masculine and more tough, but in a street kind of way. How like somebody on the street would be. It wasn't the proper way as, in my opinion, as I'm raising my kid right now. I'm teaching him how to be tough, but in a good, respectable, humble kind of way, how to be a man. My stepdad did the exact opposite. He was telling me how to be tough for the street. So he raised me, and my mom, you know, um, she pretty much she wanted that. She wanted me to have a father figure, so she kind of just sat back and let him do his thing with me. But I guess what it all comes down to is she just really wanted me to have somebody to look up to, because uh, I was really wanting attention from a older male role model, and my uncles and my older cousins, they were either in TYC or in prison, or in and out of jail. So I didn't really have a good male role model growing up. But let me see.
How many siblings do you have?
I have one younger sister, and I got two older brothers that live out there in Dallas.
Y'all were raised all together.
My brothers were in and out of the picture because they're half.
Okay.
So they'll come live with us for a few years and go back to Dallas. Me and my sister grew up with each other.
Okay. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
And you think whenever you were young, like you said, your father, went to prison. At that age, do you feel like it started affecting you since you were little, or do you think it started affecting you when your stepfather came in to your life? Because you said you were around 6 years old
Hmm.
when your stepfather, came into the picture. Do you have any memories of when you were little? Like if you were first grade, did
Yeah,
you like school?
yeah. So I guess it started to affect me when my stepdad came in the picture
In the
because I was
picture.
still too young to realize. But I know my mom, being the adult, she noticed that I was in need of a male role model. You know, but you know, me growing up, I was like in school. I loved school. You know, growing up, first grade, second grade. It wasn't until maybe sixth grade when I started to really take that, wrong turn. Because prior to that, I was a titty baby. I was sensitive. I was always yeah, getting picked on, by my friends. I was always that kid in the circle that they would pick on, to, make the day go by easy. But then when my dad or my stepdad, when he came in the picture, made me a little bit more tough. Sixth grade, and sixth grade was when I started to kind of just start to venture out and kind of doing, just dumb little things, like stealing from the stores, smoking weed, and plus my stepdad, he sold weed. And I guess to clarify how the apple doesn't far fall from the tree, I'm a fourth generation, was a fourth generation a criminal and a third generation drug dealer. So growing around, when a person's growing up around that, and that's all you slowly become, I guess, what's around you.
It was your normal.
Yeah, it wasn't an issue or I didn't see it an issue. Now when I look back on it, I tell myself, why the hell were these people in my house growing up? But now looking back on it, I say, man, my mom and my stepdad were involved in some pretty heavy stuff that I wouldn't even allow my kids to be around, but it was normal for me. That was just something that was going on in every household. So I guess when my stepdad came in the picture, I remember he had this big bag of weed underneath his bed, and I was just scooping around through his stuff, just doing, I guess just being mischievous, just looking through, his shit. And I found this big bag of weed. I was maybe fifth or sixth grade, I can't remember. And I remember I just took a handful out, and me and my friends went, and we went behind a building in the alleyway, and we just started smoking it. My dad, he came up to me and said, "Hey, I knew you were in my stash. Where is it at?" And me being, young, I said, I don't know what you're talking about." He said, "No, somebody was in the stash. I know it was you. Don't do it again." So when you grow up around that, and it comes the norm, and that's what you see every day, then as you get older, do you want to achieve these goals that you see these other people doing that are involved in the same kind of lifestyle that you're used to seeing? So I guess from sixth grade through eighth grade, that's when I started getting my toes wet. When I started to get involved in the local gang and started doing more more mischievous stuff. It went from just smoking weed and stealing from stores to breaking into stores at night, to breaking into cars all night, to smoking weed, to doing coke. And mind you, I'm not even 15 yet, and I'm already doing all this. You know, Me and my friends, we just would get together. We were all poor. We didn't have a lot of money, so the only way to get money to go have fun or to buy drugs was to go breaking into other people's, shops or cars. So I think now when I look back at it, that's when I really realized that that's when things started going, kind of sideways a little bit more and more. But me as a kid, I thought it was fun. I was, 14, 13 years old. I thought it was fun just staying out all night, hitting licks, breaking into people's cars, breaking into people's stores, and taking, candy, bag of chips, soda. But then, we'll turn around and sell some stuff to go get, weed with it or, buy some coke with it. So we were still kids because, only a kid would go into a store and, steal a box of sneakers,
Yeah. Yeah.
unless, somebody is just,
There was some innocence to a point.
yeah, yeah, it was. And it was fun. But, it just slowly started to get worse and worse and worse.
So, at what age did you start using cocaine?
I was in eighth grade.
In eighth grade when you first started using cocaine?
Yeah.
And how did you get involved in that? It was just friends?
Um, my older cousin, she was the one that actually gave it to me.
Yeah.
She was the one that was always smoking weed with me. She'll pick me up after school to go to her house and party. She got me. She got my toes wet pretty deep, you know. I remember when I was like 10 years old, she gave me my first Playboy magazine. She said, "Hey, don't tell your mom about this." So I had a stash of Playboy magazine under my bed at 10. At that time, I thought I was cool, but looking back, it really screwed up my mind because now, that spirit of perversion has been on my mind or been on me since I was a kid. So just little situations like that growing up, not just only with my older cousin, showing me things like that, it messed with my mind a lot until this day. I still have issues and I still struggle with, shit like that because I was exposed to it at a young age. Now I look back and I got a 10-year-old and a 8-year-old, and I tell myself, what the hell was I doing at their age, at their sweet little, minds that are just pure and innocent looking at this shit? And why was my older cousins allowing me to look at this stuff with them, or like, why didn't anybody step in and say, no, that's wrong? So now when I look back at it, I was pure, but shit happens, and to this day it messes me up. But she was like the older cool cousin. I was 10 years old. She'll give me Playboys. She would pick me up, take me to the movies, smoke weed with me. And I remember it was I should have brought her water. I remember it was after school. She picked me up, and I went to her house, and we started drinking, started smoking. Then before she dropped me off, she pulled out this fat little bag, maybe like 2, 3 grams of coke, and she started hitting some bumps, some keys. And she turned over. She said, "Don't tell your mom about this, but here, try this." And I took, 2 hits. Then she said, "No, hey, just keep it." She said, "I got more at the house." She said, "Go with your friends and go use it with your friends." The very next day, I took it to school like a dumbass. Thankfully, I didn't get caught. So after school, me and my friend went to his house, and his mom was still at work, and we started doing keys in his room. So I was in eighth grade when I was in eighth grade when I first started using coke.
Did you like the feeling, or was it a form for you to escape your reality?
We liked the feeling because it was a different kind of high, and we didn't experience what we felt on cocaine with weed. And it was just, we just liked the way it felt. I think when I got older and started to experience with more drugs, that's when I used them as an escape from.
From your reality.
Yes, ma'am.
Was there, I know you said your mom worked a lot. Was there some sort of discipline at your house? Like, was there any time that you would come high and they would be like, what are you doing? Or, you know,
When I was using, I guess from like sixth to eighth grade, my mom had cancer, so she wasn't really around to watch me do all this. But prior to her having cancer, if I messed up in school or if I got in trouble doing anything, just somebody would say, "Hey, blah blah blah, Jacob is doing this on the street." I would get spanked. I remember they had a paddle about this big, that thick, and they would spank me with the paddle. You know, Nowadays, it's different.
yeah,
Nowadays, you can't do that.
yeah.
Because somebody hears it. Some people get a little, they feel some
There's
type of
some,
way and
yeah.
they want to tell somebody. But back in the '90s, every kid was getting whooped. Chanclas, shoes, hangers, twigs, paddles.
Yeah.
So my stepdad, he was the one that would spank me because I would want my mom to spank me because it didn't hurt. But I knew when I saw my dad come in, I knew that shit was going to burn. And sure enough, he was the one to, I guess, to put his foot down, so to say. But when I got older, maybe seventh grade, the spanking stopped. It was more kind of lectures and having talks. So it wasn't really, too much discipline in the house.
But you think that seventh, eighth grade, you were already too into it? for it to be, you know, I'm sure they were like, stop, or this is wrong. But then you were seeing it every day. Did you think it was like, okay, you're telling me to stop, but then I'm seeing it every day? Is it kind of like a normal, you know?
Yeah. Oh
Is
yeah.
were those kind of your thoughts?
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course, because everybody was doing it. My older homeboys were doing it. My cousins, were doing it. My uncles were constantly in and out of prison. And when they weren't in prison, they were either slanging or I guess selling, or they were always out in the streets, getting into fights or shootouts. So it was just normal. I mean, I guess back in my mind, I always knew it was bad because I would have friends go to TYC and get in trouble for doing the same shit that we were doing. So I knew that there was a consequence for my actions, but it was fun. I was, still a kid, but if my son or my daughter was doing that kind of shit, with me around, I wouldn't allow it at all, just because I know the repercussions and the consequences.
Did you finish high school?
No, ma'am.
To what grade did you go to?
I dropped out in ninth grade. I
Ninth
spent
grade.
3 years in ninth grade, and I wasn't able to make it past. But when I got to ninth grade, that's when I finally got. I guess when I hit ninth grade, I got more involved into the gangs and more involved into selling. I was only in ninth grade for maybe one semester. Then the other semester, I wouldn't, go to school. I was always skipping. But ninth grade was the only grade I ever got to.
Tell us a little bit of how was your entrance into the gang world.
It was at first it seemed, like a badge of honor, to say, hey, I'm part of this clique, or hey, I'm from Southside, and this is my hood. This is where, Southside is my hood, and this is what we do, and this is who we represent. So it was like like a badge of honor, just to say, hey, I'm part of this set. I'm part of this hood. Don't mess with me, and you don't even think about, or I guess for me, when somebody is getting, or what I noticed looking back, I never really realized that I was part of a gang or a hood until I was maybe in eighth or ninth grade, when other hoods would go to school with us and they would ask us, where you from? Or I guess they started in sixth grade. Now when I think about it, we went to a middle school and we had different hoods everywhere. We had some from Central, some from East Side, some from Crips and Bloods. And the first thing, I guess the first question that somebody will ask somebody is, "Where are you from?" or "What set what set you claim?" So I was in about sixth grade when I finally realized that I was part of a hood. Like Southside was my hood. That's who we represent. That's who we are. And that carried on all the way up until ninth grade. And ninth grade, when you hit high school, in the bigger cities, you get a handful of middle schools from every hood they put into one high school. So when you go to high school, not only do you got, Southside, Sureños, Barrio Centro, Crips, Bloods, Parus, you know, you got 18th Street, you got everybody into a damn high school. And everybody wants to be cool. Everybody wants to be the biggest man on campus. So they're always going to try to walk with their chest out, a little bit more than the next person. But in ninth grade is when I realized, like, hey, this game banging is getting to the next level. Because now when you're in ninth grade, you got 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds that are in high school. I guess adults that are still game banging. Kids, now when I look back at it, they're still kids. But when you're 14, you look at a 19-year-old as, hey, that's an adult. So now you got 19-year-olds game banging, and that's when I noticed that in ninth grade, it just it went up to a whole different level. It got more serious, and things started getting more crazier at school.
So going back a little bit to your childhood, did you have any dreams when you were younger? Did you have any, like, I would say, you know how when we're little, sometimes they're like, I want to be a teacher, I want to be a doctor. Did that ever cross your mind? I know you grew up in a very harsh environment, or were you just kind of groomed, to think this is my future?
I had two dreams growing up, and it was the only dreams I ever had. The first dream was to be a baseball player because I did play baseball. Although I come from a broken home, I played baseball for 10 years, and I played it with my kids in my neighborhood, and everybody played on the same team, and we were damn good. We were, you know, winning championships. We will go to other cities and other, playoffs and tournaments, and we will win. And that, I guess, that was probably the only dream I probably had was to be a baseball player. But when I got to, I played baseball all the way up until almost ninth grade. Ninth grade, I made the team, but then I took that wrong turn again. I tried to do good, but something always, pulled me back 10 steps. So in ninth grade, my freshman year, when I went to Arlington, I tried out for the team. The coaches liked me, but you you know, I got involved in the Arlington gangs, so they kind of like brushed me away from playing baseball. And plus, I didn't have a dad there or a proper dad to say, hey, go over here, make sure your ass is at practice. So I wanted to be a ball player. The second dream I had, I know it sounds stupid, but I wanted to be a drug dealer. Once I knew, I guess in about eighth, ninth grade, once I knew what a D boy was, I wanted to be a D boy. But those were like the only two dreams I really had.
So when you got to ninth grade, things started getting serious. You're out of school. You're involved in a gang now. How was your life from there?
So I went to two high schools. I went to one in Fort Worth. Um, I was there for a semester, got kicked out. Then we moved to Arlington, so I started going to a high school out in Arlington. It was Lamar High, and when I was in Fort Worth, me and my old friends, when we used to click up and come together and go, I guess, fight other gangs or fight other, hoods. That's what I was used to. But then when I went to Arlington, these kids were on a whole different level than what the hell we were doing in Fort Worth. When I was in Fort Worth, we were still doing fights, we were still, fighting in school. But when I went to Arlington, it just jumped up. And I'm not gonna lie, I was scared, because we moved right into the bad part of town. And the area that we moved into was, I guess, the color of the hood was blue. It was really blue, and you'll see a little bit of red, but it wasn't a lot of red. The hood that I grew up in Fort Worth, it was either, or I guess when I was growing up, it was red or brown. That was the main two colors of the hood. When I went to Arlington, I was the only kid in my school, or the only essay in my school that was always in red. I would go there wearing red pants, red shirt, red hat, and I stuck out like a sore thumb. But I guess, the fact that I smoked weed is where we kind of broke common ground with some of the essays over there because my neighbors, where we used to live at, they were a part of a Arlington gang, and they were always wearing blue. I remember that. And when I first moved next door to them, they were always me mugging me, and I was always me mugging them. And what broke the ice was weed. I was always smoking weed. Their mom wouldn't allow them to smoke weed at her house, so they would always see me smoke weed on my porch because my mom would let me smoke weed, on the porch, in my room, in the living room, and they will always see me after school sit on my porch, roll a blunt, and we will come home at the same time from the high school. And one day, we're walking home, and they say, "Hey, can we smoke with you? I got some weed." And my mom, she can't, and my mom, she's not going to let me smoke at our house. It was the two older brothers. So I said, "Yeah." So we sat on the porch, and we started smoking weed, and got to talking to them. They brought some of their other homeboys over from the local gang, and that's how I started meeting the other people in that hood was through them. And slowly and over time started meeting more, and all my clothes wanted changing from red to blue. Slowly over time. It took about 3 years to finally convert me, and or kind of get comfortable wearing blue. Because for a while, all I wore was red. I was always wearing red from you know 5 years old all the way up until I was in Arlington. Maybe 16, 17 years old. I was always in red, and I think till this day, my favorite color is red. It's just something that always stuck with me. But it took them, or I guess it took me about 3 years to finally to put on like a blue flannel or put on a blue hat or a blue bandana. But over time, meeting these other guys, like I said, I realized that the shit I was doing in Fort Worth with me, my childhood friends, you know, was like fifth grade stuff. When I moved over there, these guys were doing, on a college level of, gang banging, type stuff. I guess, for example, like I said, when me and my friends would click up, we would just go fight other gangs or fight other hoods, fight in school. When I moved to Arlington, there was kids that were younger than me. I was 14. There was kids younger than me already doing drive-bys or just getting out of TYC from doing a drive-by or shooting somebody. There was kids already taking guns to the high school to go shoot up a rival gang member. I remember my first year out there, the gang I was hanging around with, one of their homeboys, he was like in 11th grade or 10th grade. One of their homeboys drove up to the high school and he pulled out a shotgun right in front of the high school at the rival, or I guess the person he was beefing with, he pulled it out against him, and that kid, he ran inside the school. So I went from just smoking weed, breaking into cars and just doing, fights, and it was nothing big. It was just fighting to out of nowhere. If you're going to a fight, then you better have a gun or a knife on you because more than likely they have one. So you want to be prepared to kids 13, 12 years old already doing drive-bys and shooting people. So it elevated, just like this. It just went straight up. And now when I look back at it, I tell myself, man, those kids that were doing those drive-bys, I wonder how their household was, or I wonder what the hell was going on with their mom and dad that they were allowing a little 13-year-old to go run the streets all damn night on a weekend and catch a case. So the level of gang maturity was a lot different in Arlington, or at least when I moved there, it was a lot different than what I was used to seeing.
What was the craziest thing you had to do that you say I came home and I can't believe I did it? When, like you said, it started getting really hard. The gangbang was completely different from your old environment to your new environment. What was something that happened that you're just like, okay, I'm in it. Like there's no going back.
I remember before I even got jumped into the gang, I went on my first drive-by. I was like 15 years old, and prior to that, in Fort Worth, I never was around anybody who ever, did anything like that. And I remember them pick me, like I remember them. They picked me up, and they had a gun on them, and I thought we were just rolling around. And in my head, I said, "Cool, they got a gun," and they said, "Hey, so and so is over here, and this is what I want you to do." They're talking amongst themselves. I'm just in the back. They're just talking to each other. They say, "Hey, I want to pull right here, and you're going to get off, and you're going to just walk up there really slow, then start shooting, and just come back to the car." And I'm sitting there smoking, and as soon as I hear all this, my heart just starts pounding, and I'm telling myself, I want to get out. I want to get out this car right now. You're 15 years old. Now when I look back at it, 15 is still a baby.
Yeah.
I got a nephew that's, 14, about to be 15 this year, and I look at him and I tell myself, man, he's not doing a quarter or a tenth of the shit I was doing when I was his age. And I look at him, I said, man, I see how he is still somewhat innocent, but 14, 15 years old, that's still a kid, that's still a baby.
Nothing compared to what you were living.
Yeah. So my heart starts pounding. I remember my heart starts pounding, pounding, pounding. And I remember one of the OGs, he just got out as if it was another day in his life. He just got out like nothing. He just got out. He walked over there with a pump action shotgun and he just started unloading the clip on these guys and he just hopped back in there. He said, okay, let's go drive. And I'm sitting there just smoking weed and my heart just pounding. I could not put that blunt down for anything. I was just so damn nervous. And these guys are just laughing about it. Like, oh man, you crazy homeboy, man. Dude, man, y'all should have seen their faces when they saw it was me. Them mother efforts had no idea that, I was coming for them. And they're over here cracking jokes about it, and I would say they're maybe 19, early 20s, mid 20s. They're doing this. And here I am, a little 15-year-old, just in a back seat, just what the hell just happened? They dropped me home, and I remember laying in the bed just scared out of my mind. I said, man, I don't want to go to a TYC. I said, what if we get caught? And sure enough, they took me on a different one. And mind you, I'm still not part of their gang yet. I'm still, I guess, not a recruiter, a prospect, I guess. I was just hanging around with them. I was just a good acquaintance. Then slowly, after watching them do it, um, after about 3, 4 years of always being around them, that's when I finally made the decision. Hey, I want to get jumped in, and it's funny how that happened because I was always fighting at Lamar High School. I was always getting into some type of trouble. I would even say if the say my homeboys from Arlington were getting jumped at school, I would jump in for them, even though we were two different hoods. I would jump in for them. I was always had their back, but then I noticed that when I would get jumped or a lot of heat would come on me, that they would have my back. So I finally asked them, say, hey, what's going on? Why don't you guys ever, have my back or defend me when I'm fighting or, I got heat on me? And they said straight up, because you're from a different hood and you're not part of this hood yet. So once they said that, I said, okay, cool. About maybe 6 months later, that's when I finally made that choice to get jumped in. Then once I got jumped in, the first thing that they did was, okay, now let's go see if you're about it. I was,
Jumped in, you mean get beat up
oh,
into it? Or
yeah, I got my ass beat.
yeah.
Yeah, man, I had a big old shoe mark right here from somebody stopping on my face. I'm talking about, they stopped on my face so hard, you saw like the bottom of the shoe right on my face, and he's like saw the little Nike check mark from a Cortez. It was just a big old shoe mark on my face. They just pounded my face in, and I bet they were used to that stuff.
Yeah.
Me, I'm just thinking it was gonna be something very brief. No, these guys, if they say let's jump you in, or if you want to make that choice to get jumped in, these guys are going to legit make sure that they put your ass in a hospital. And sure enough, I did 2 rounds with them with 3 of the other guys, and got jumped in. And woke up the next morning, my cheeks were like this wide, had a big old shoe mark right here from them stomping on my face, a big old knot. I couldn't eat anything for about 2 weeks without my jaw hurting because it was just so swollen up. And sure enough, the very next weekend they said, okay, now let's go see if you're um, about it, or let's go see if you're down. They said, okay, so and so, this clique is going to be over here. It's your turn to do a drive by. And I didn't want to. I was like, oh damn, what the hell? But I was watching them so much already to where when you watch them happen over and over again and you're just in the passenger side and you're just watching, you kind of get an idea of what to do and what to expect. But now that I'm the one pulling the trigger, I get my heart pounding again, because prior, I think it was maybe about three or four drive-bys I would go on and I would just watch. After the second one, I didn't get nervous anymore. I would just say, okay, so just another weekend. I want to just sit back here, smoke a blunt, laugh about it later. This time, I was pulling the trigger and my heart was pounding again. Like the first time it was pounding when I went on my first drive-by. My heart was just boom, 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 boom. I said, damn it, why am I doing this? And the first thing that went in my mind was my mom. I said, man, she finds out I'm doing this. I said, she's gonna beat my ass. She's gonna have my uncles beat my ass, my older cousins beat my ass. If I get locked up, because I think I was already 16, 17 at that time. I said, if I get locked up, I said, they may send me to prison. And I said, if I got family in there, I said, these guys are going to legit beat my ass for getting into prison. And, all these thoughts start, playing in your head. But of course, peer pressure, you're there at the spur of the moment. Everybody's saying, hey, let's go to this area and let's go shoot them up and let's go see if you're about it. And sure enough, we drove from one hood to the next hood, saw the rival click there, and they said, "Hey, I want to park right here, and I want you just to get off like the way we done it before." And I'm just sitting there like, "Oh man," I'm telling myself, "No, I don't want to do this." And I remember they gave me a cheap pistol. It was a high point 380, a little cheap thing. I'm not sure if you're familiar with guns or what, but a high point is like the lowest pistols you could get. Back in the day, you could buy one for $100. You know, they did the job. They worked, and they shot, but it was a cheap pistol. And I remember they gave it, they said, here you go. And sure enough, went by, shot up the place, got back in the car, gave it to the I gave the gun back to the owner. We drove off. They laughed about it. You know, I was still nervous. So we just went back to the spot and we just started drinking and started smoking. And I guess it sounds stupid, but start celebrating. My maturity and my maturity into the gang. Started celebrating, started drinking, and started laughing about it. But that right there, Diana, that became the way of life for like several years. And not only was I game banging pretty deep, but around that time I started selling weed. I started selling weed when I was 14. 14, I was in eighth grade when I started selling weed. Got caught at school with a few dime bags and got kicked out of school in eighth grade. I started selling weed in eighth grade, and when I was just selling weed when I was in Fort Worth, it was just normal, just buy a little ounce, turn around, flip it, make about $20. I make $20 and I get three blunts for free. So I thought that was pretty cool. I said, cool, I'm doing something here. Ninth grade, was still doing it. It wasn't until when I moved to Arlington where when I moved to Arlington, that's when I noticed that everything skyrocketed from me game banging to from doing little mischievous misdemeanors to doing felonies, from selling ounces to selling pounds, all in a matter of several years.
Did you ever go to juvie
Yeah.
during that time?
Oh yeah, I did a
Yeah.
handful of times.
For
I
real.
remember my mom was pissed, and my stepdad, was pissed when they had to go pick me up. The first time I went to juvie was in middle school because I got caught with weed. You know, I got caught with weed. They sent me to juvie, and my dad was pissed. I got my ass beat that day. You know, my dad was pissed. But yeah, I went to juvie a handful of times. Then, but at a certain age, I think it's like 17 is when they stopped sending you to juvenile. And from seventh grade to about ninth grade, I was in and out the system from rehab to juvenile. I went to rehab a few times, and I was in rehab the first time 2 months, turned around and went back for another 2 months also. Then went to juvenile about three times. But everything just skyrocketed me selling uh, from me selling ounces to out of out of nowhere just selling pounds, you know. So at the same time, while I'm game banging, I'm also selling, you know. So not only am I double dipping, I'm bringing a lot of heat to myself because you know my mom, she would let me smoke weed. My dad, he had the weed. So and my mom, she knew how to sell drugs because um, her dad was a drug lord. So like I said at the beginning, I'm a third generation drug dealer, fourth generation criminal. You know, my great grandpa, he started the generational curse. He killed somebody, and we believe that's how everything just started following us. Like a curse just kept on going from one generation to the next generation. So my mom, she knew how to sell drugs. My uncles were drug runners because their dad was a drug lord. You know, me always smoking weed, always had it on me. I was smoking it and slinging it, but I was also game banging, so I was double dipping and everything. And I think that's when everything kind of took a big shift because at one time when I was like maybe 14, I would just get maybe a quarter pound, half pound, a pound. It, you know, just something that I could just make a few dollars on, help my mom pay the bills, have some money to go party, just go have fun. You know, I know, like I know it was wrong, but I wasn't doing it to like be a Pablo Escobar or a El Chapo. I just wanted to be a normal. I know that sounds stupid, but I just wanted to be a normal drug dealer. You know, I didn't want to, you know, get too big. I just wanted to have free weed, have some money to help my mom pay the bills, and have some money to go party. Then turn around and go do it again. I thought that was fun. I was maybe 14 years old when I started doing that. By the time I hit 17, from yeah 14 to 17 was when me and my homeboy started working for a cartel out of Mexico, and it happened out the blue. You know, it was I would say it was maybe February or March. There was a big drought in DFW. I'm not sure you even know what that means, but it just means everywhere you can't get no drugs. You know, there's a big drought. Nobody has anything, you know, and if you came across something, it was super high because it was supply on demand. And it's
Yeah,
funny, you know,
yeah,
even in the drug world, people
that's
are
true.
capitalists, you know.
Yeah.
So it was supply on demand, you know. So when they did have it, it was super high to where nobody didn't want to buy it, or you would have to make small profit, you know, just to keep your customers coming to you. And I remember I'm asking my I know it sounds stupid, but I asked my brother-in-law, my sister's baby daddy, ask him. I said, "Hey, ask one of your little essays that you work with, because he did construction." I said, "Ask one of them if they got a plug." He said, "Nah, man." He said, "These guys don't do that stuff." He said, "Man, they're about work. They're working." I said, "Just ask them, dude." I said, "I promise you, if you ask at least about 20 of them, one of them will know a plug." He said, "Nah, nah, nah, nah." And sure enough, me and him going back and forth a few weeks on, he came back and said, "Hey, I found a plug." I said, "I told you." I said, "I told you." I said, "I knew." I said, "Who is it?" He said, he said, "Man, I don't know if you want to get involved in these people." I said, "I don't care." I told him I'm to the point to where I need to get something going, you know. And mind you, me and my homeboy are now slanging together. So he said, "Well, it's my close worker. It's his uncle, you know." He said he's the plug, and I said, "Okay, cool." I said, "So let's meet him." They said, "Man, are you sure you want to go down that?" You know, like he pretty much was trying to steer me away from it because he already knew who they were. Me, I didn't know who the hell they were. I just knew that they were the plug, the supplier, and they had the drugs, and that's what we needed. Then he tells me, he said, "Yeah," he said, "these guys, they're losetas." I said, "Okay, cool." I'm like, "What's that?" You know, me being,
Yeah.
you know,
Not knowing how
Chicano.
big it was.
Yeah, not knowing how big, you know, that cartel was, me being Chicano, not really familiar with, you know, these Mexican cartels. I said, "Okay, cool. Who's that?" They said, "It's Aziz." I said, all right, well, who is it? So then I went to the internet, started looking them up. I said, oh, damn. I said, all right. So me and my friend talked about it for, about a day. And we came to our senses and we said, know what? Let's go ahead and do it because this right here is the plug that we've been wanting. This is a plug that everybody desires when you're in the hood. Like you want to have that plug to where they're always giving it to you. And we said, know what? Let's go ahead and give it a shot. Let's see what happens. And I still remember the guy's name. I still remember how he looks. Drove a regular vehicle, played it off very well. First time I seen him, I said, yeah, this cartel right here. Dude had a nice cowboy hat, a few big old gold chains, gold rings on every finger, dressed like a vaquero, had the boots, everything. I said, damn, like this dude me some business. We met him. He came to our trap house, right? And mind you, at the same time, I'm still game banging, but he doesn't know that where he knew what our gang is and who we were, but he didn't know that we were doing it that deep. Like he didn't know that I was getting into shootouts in front of my trap house. If he would have known that, he probably would have said, "No, what? Like it's a big risk." But
Because just to keep in mind for our audience, the way of operating, gangbanging is one deal, and drug selling drugs is a whole different form of operation.
yeah, it's
That's why you said if he would have known what you were into, he would have
yeah,
never agreed to bend your plug because
yeah,
it's a whole different system
it
of
is.
operations.
It is. Especially back in my neighborhood, we're too stupid to realize, hey, don't mix business with pleasure. Now that I'm older and I tell myself, man, if I was still doing what I was doing right now, I probably would still have my gang as a muscle and more organized, but I would not double dip to where I'll be telling my homeboys, hey, let's go shoot these guys up and let's turn around and go flip some bricks. If I was older and more like mature, it'll be more organized now to where like you see these bigger syndicates and like mafias where they're a crime syndicate, but they also have everything in line. It's like they know when and how to use their muscle to scare people for their advantage. Me, we're just being stupid, like, hey, let's get in a shootout in front of our house because it's cool. We're just flaunting and just bringing more attention to us. So yeah, it was a big separation. So if he would have known that, the weekend before we got into a shootout in front of our house and our house was, hot, he probably would have said, hell no.
Yeah,
But
because they want to keep low.
yeah, yeah, exactly. They want to keep low and, they don't want no heat on them. But he knew that we could push the weight. And I remember how it happened. We brought him like a couple racks, or I guess a few $1,000, and we gave it to him. And we didn't hear from him for like 2 days. And out of nowhere, so our spokesman that was talking for us was my homeboy's older brother, who was from Mexico and came over here when he was like 6, 7. You know, he was our spokesman. Kind of like just our middleman talking to him for us. He's the one that said, "Hey, he's about the business, give him the money, blah blah blah." And about 2 days, my homeboy he calls me. He said, "Hey, he's ready for the drop off." And we thought, man, Diana, we literally thought it was gonna be just something small, just something very, small, just something I guess
What you were
about
used to dealing with.
yeah, maybe like 4 or 5 pounds because a pound was at those times maybe $400. So we said, okay, maybe we'll get a discount and get, a few extra pounds. Nah, man. As soon as he said, hey, I got it, he sent, his drivers out there. It was at a Home Depot out there in Arlington. He sent his drivers out there. And I kid you not, it's like something that you see off the damn movies. We pull up trunk to trunk. They pop their trunk, we pop our trunk, and they bring these like big 3 duffel bags. I'm talking about these big ass duffel bags and just shove them in our truck. And they say, okay, we'll see you guys in a few weeks. And they just drove off. And we look at each other and we get to the, back to the spot and we open all this, bags up and there's freaking bricks and bricks of weed. And we're just sitting there and said, damn, all right, well, I guess let's get to work, And sure enough, we got rid of all that weed in about a week and a half. We turned around and called him and he was really he was really impressed when we called him and said, hey, because so we gave him 2 grand, right, as a down payment, and he fronted us the rest. He said, okay, this is what you owe us. So we turned around, we paid him what we owed him, and we kept. And when we turned around and gave him the money, just stacks of cash. This time he came to the house and he walked in there. There was the second time coming to the house. The first time was him meeting us the first time. The second time was him coming in there and us paying him. And back then I didn't know a lot of Spanish, and I can remember them, my older homeboy talking to him at the table, big ass pile of cash. Then when he walks out, he shakes everybody's hand. We asked my homeboy what happened. He said, "Oh, he's on the front of some keys next time, and next time he's giving us, double the amount because he was very happy that we were able to get rid of it." And me and my other homeboys, because now it's like a drug circle. We all look at each other and we're saying, "What the hell did? Oh, all right, cool." Same thing happened again, Diana. 2 days later, he calls us, "Hey, it's ready to get picked up. Go to this location." We pull up again, pop the trunk. This time we got, you know, a brick of weed this freaking big, just freaking wrapped up in this big ass like army looking bag, just big old freaking brick of weed and a few keys of coke. And we told my older homeboy, we said, "We don't sell coke, we just sell weed." He said, "That's cool." He said, "We got it, they'll buy it." All right, sure enough, he was right. So now we're slinging coke, and now we got this coke operation going on top of selling the weed. I remember me and my homeboy, we broke down half of that weed, or I guess that big ass brick, and this is back then before what weed is now today.
Because it
About
was worth more money back in the
it was
days.
worth a lot more money. There wasn't, I guess like kids call it Zaza or Kush or like all these weird names for this fancy grade of weed. Back then, it was just palomita, which is popcorn, and they had Reggie. That's all it was, 15, 20 years ago. Or was it? Yeah, about 20 years ago. That's all it was. And if you had what kids nowadays call Zaza or something like that, I guess that's just like a form of like really good weed. If you had that, that stuff was like a damn unicorn. It was hard to come by. So
So you could say now that you were dealing with weed and cocaine, were you also escalating in the gang as you mean as, you were getting more respect or you had more people under you, or where did you stand
oh yeah,
at that moment?
so once once I started selling weed, I noticed that my rank started going higher and higher just because not because of me going out and robbing people or shooting people or getting involved in more beef. Although I was still doing that, I wasn't doing it as much. But when it came time to go handle business, I would, you know. But I also noticed that they they wanted me to just sell because if I sold, if I had a large amount of weed, that meant that these fuckers or these guys could party for free, free weed, free beer, free cocaine, 24/7. So of course, they're like, hey, go ahead and keep selling, and we could bum off of you. Which at that time I didn't have an issue with it. I have guys at my house 3 days straight partying. You know,
Were you a user at the moment too?
uh, I would do coke every now and then. If I wanted to party hard, if I wanted to stay up, 3 or 4 days, and yeah, I would, get, a half, a quarter ounce or half ounce of coke, and me and 20 homeboys and homegirls would just stay up all damn weekend and do it. But it wasn't something that I guess weed was my go-to. You know, weed was my go-to. Weed and pills. Those were my go-to. So I was using coke every now and then if I wanted to party hard, but weed was something that I would wake up every morning. I would go to the corner store, and I'm not sure if you see those big old box of cigarillos they have. Like now they got them in little packs of two or threes. Me and my homeboy will go in there and buy like a whole damn box of singles, and we'll say, "Hey, I want 2 or 3 boxes," and that was our routine. We'll wake up every morning. I will roll like 10, maybe like 5 or 10 blunts, and he'll turn around and roll 5 or 10 blunts, and we'll be smoking them all day from morning to night. That's what we did. Just kept on smoking. It was if somebody else or if we knew that we were going to have company, then we'll roll 30 blunts. We just kept on smoking weed. That was my go-to, but I didn't really do cocaine a lot like that. My other homeboys did. They loved it. They would sit there and they would just sit at the table doing it, jaw moving back and forth. And I said, I don't like that.
Yeah.
I don't like looking like that. I just like smoking, eating, going to sleep, sell it, and that's it. So circle back to us receiving that big brick of weed. Me and my home would cut it down the middle. We put some in pounds, some in QP, some in half pounds. You know, for our big for our big customers. Then we made about $20,000 in dime bags and 20 bags, and we just had a big old bag right there, just full with all these tiny little bags, just everywhere. And it got to the point to where you know you will walk down the hallway and you'll see like a dime bag on the floor, and you just like kick it over there, like, hey, is that yours? You just kick it to his room or something. It's like, hey, pick that up, because there was just so much
Too
of it
much.
everywhere. So I remember it took us 2 weeks, Diana, to sell that big ass bag that had all those tiny little bags in it. It took us 2 weeks to sell all of that. Then, or I guess it took us 2 weeks to sell everything. Then we turned around, paid the cartel their money, and the coke, same thing. My homeboy, we didn't have a lot of customers that liked coke or that bought it, but my homeboy, the one that was talking for us, he had, I guess his customers by far loved cocaine more than what our customers did. So we wound up leaving the coke to him, and he would sell it. And I remember him on the bed, and he was a bigger dude. He was about 6 foot, about 300 pounds. Big dude. I remember walking into the room and him having all these damn 20s and hundreds all over the bed and a big old stack of it. And he's over there counting it. And this guy just falls asleep. He just falls asleep counting the money. And at first, I thought he was playing. I said, hey, start poking him. Huh, huh, huh. Hey, you awake? Yeah, yeah, yeah. So we leave him alone. We go out to eat. We come back. He's still asleep with all this money. So we said, hey, let's just put in a trash bag for him. And but sure enough, all that money he had, he turned around and he paid the cartel. And of course, when you're moving that much weight for them, they see that, and they like money just like everybody does.
Everybody likes money. Yep.
Everybody loves money. So sure enough, they say, hey, this time we're gonna give you guys more. And that's when me and my homeboy were just, I don't know, man. This is already a lot of shit that you're giving us. But my homeboy, the one that was talking for us, he's, man, that's all right, man. We'll get it, we'll get rid of it, and we'll take care of it, man. Man, don't worry about it. I was like, all right, cool. So sure enough, homeboy from the Cetas comes, picks up his money, tells us, hey, the drop off's gonna be over here this time, and it's gonna be more. Bring 2 cars. Well, what the hell? So sure enough, bring 2 cars, pull up trunk to trunk, pick them up, boom, and we do this whole operation with them for about, I would say about 6 months, 6, 7 months. We were doing this with them. But at the same time, we started giving. At the same time, we started to double dip. We started to get more involved in um, game banging. I started doing bars, so I was in my mind. My mind wasn't there. I would go rob people for no reason, just because I'm not sure if you ever met anybody or seen how people act on Xanax, or have you seen the videos? It reacts. I guess everybody reacts differently to
Mm-hmm.
them, but it always made me more angry, and I would forget what I was doing. And I had no reason to go rob people, because I had
Because you were
money.
making money.
Yeah, double dipping. Just wanted to show off, be cool in front of my homeboys, and we started getting really. I guess it got to the point to where we were just more focused on game banging. Like our game banging started just to overtake what we were doing. There's like several times where we would get into a big ass fight, big ass brawl in front of our trap house, run inside, and maybe not even 5 minutes later, our house would be surrounded with cops just banging on every window, every door. And we're not dumb. We knew the law. We knew that they could not kick that door down without a warrant. So we would just turn the lights off, and they will knock on that door for, easily a few hours, just banging and banging and banging, and eventually they will leave. You know, we done this, several times where the cops were always banging on our door. One time I remember it was after school. I went to the high school to pick up my homeboys from school. I see my homeboy fighting a older guy that was about my age. He was about 18 years old. My younger homeboy is about 15. We see him about to get into it at the Walgreens across the street from the school. Why is that? Like every time you see a high school, there's always a CVS or Walgreens. Why is that? These guys are asking to get robbed.
Yeah.
I wonder what the CEO says. Hey, there's a high school. Let's set up, shop right there and lose, revenue. I don't know why it's like that, but it is. So, sure enough, they're at the Walgreens about to throw down. Then, as soon as I see my homeboy, backing up because he pulls out this big ass knife on him, starts swinging at him. Mind you, it's after school, so there's parents, there's people coming back and forth, buses passing by. As soon as we see that, my homeboys hop out our vehicle and we start chasing that guy down. We chase him down into his car, and now we're chasing him, and we're just getting behind him, trying to run him off the road. And he knew where we lived at. We knew where he lived at. It's just part of, you know, staying in the hood. You kind of know where everybody mom stays, where the hangout spots are at. So we chase him, and we think we we thought we just ran him off the road, and we couldn't find him no more. As soon as we pulled into our trap house, this dude out of nowhere just pulled around to our trap house. So, and he was hot headed. Like, he was known for stabbing, he was known for shooting, he was known to be trigger happy. So, as soon as he pulled up to our, pulled inside our house, my homeboy just walks outside with his big ass shotgun. And automatically, when you know somebody is that hot headed and they got that much balls to come into your house like that, we think, well, he has a gun. He's trying to shoot us up. My homeboy, no hesitation. I remember I was out in the front smoking. It was just me and my homeboy just smoking, laughing about it. Hey, he was scared, blah, blah, blah. Just, puffing a blunt. As soon as we're puffing a blunt, we see him roll in, fast too. Parts of the car, gets out. And as soon as we turn around, I guess my homeboy heard the commotion from the inside, because as soon as we turn around, my homeboy just starts, shouting, just starts shouting in Spanish, and he just pulls out that freaking gun, and he just starts shooting at him. He shoots twice, boom, boom, and that guy, he kind of like ducks a little bit, and he runs behind the car, and we all thought that he was going to start shooting back, but he didn't have a gun on him. So my homeboy, as he is running around the car, my homeboy just starts walking towards the car, and he unloads the whole clip of the shotgun on him. And my homeboy, he winds up shooting out his windows, winds up shooting at him. Thankfully, thank God that my homeboy didn't shoot that guy, because if he would have shot him, then that would have been a murder that was at our front door. Thank God that that guy, he lived, and none of those shots from the shotgun went by him. So as soon as he hopped in the car, he left. And mind you, we got keys and bricks of weed inside as we're doing all this, and we got thousands of Xanax inside. So not only are we working for the Los Zetas, you know, but we're also bringing a lot of heat to our house, to where it gets to that point to where me and my homeboy, we just start spending all the damn money that we're getting. We're just making sure that we have just enough to pay back homeboy, to make sure we pay him back. But all the money that we're making, man, we could have freaking invested it and wisely. We could have, done something smart with it. But
Build a legit business.
yeah, build a legit business, real estate, something, But we were always at the strip clubs. We were always taking everybody out to eat. We're always going to the strip clubs and making it rain, buying, chains, watches. We'll go to the freaking mall and spend easily a stack, or I guess we'll go to the mall and spend $1,000 just on Jordans. So we just wanted to just I guess just have fun with that money, especially
And I
coming.
feel like it comes into place when you don't have money
Yeah,
and you have the money, you don't know how to react.
exactly.
That's why they say a lot of people that become billionaires or millionaires with the lottery, 6 months, 8 months into it, they're back to where they started.
Yeah, yeah, that's
Because
true.
especially even nowadays, we in school we're not taught how to manage money. If you can't manage $1, you're not going to be able to manage $1 million.
I took Dave Ramsey classes when I got older. I
Yeah,
got to know how to
exactly.
manage
Yeah,
money, and it
yeah.
helped me out a lot. It helped me to mature because, like you said, coming from a really broken and poor home to where we didn't have money to turn the lights on at some months, to where we were running extension cords from our neighbor's house into our home to make sure we had electricity for a few weeks. When you grow up in that environment, like you said, when you get all this cash on you, the first thing you want to do is go spend it. You can't handle it, and on top of that, I was always throwing some money to my mom, and I think that's the first thing that people do when they get money. I mean, if you got a good relationship with your parents, is
And money gives you power.
yeah,
Regardless of how you got it, it's reality. Money gives you power.
yeah,
Either you can use that power in a good way or you can use that power in a bad way.
yeah.
You
That's
know?
true. And coming from a broken home, Diana, money was very hard to come by. Except when my dad was when he had when me, him, and my mom were slanging. I remember us always going out to you know going out to go shopping, always going out to go eat, always going out to do fun things when they were slinging. At that time, I didn't know that's where that money came from. But when I got older, my mom would say, "Hey, do you still remember this time that we went to go do this, this, and that?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "I made a couple grand that day in profit, so I took you guys out. I took you and your sister out shopping and had some fun." I was maybe in my mid 20s when she was telling me this. As a kid, you're just saying, "Oh, cool," it's a fun day to go to the arcade. My mom, she's taking us out, not knowing where this money comes from. But as a kid, you're just excited to go experience that. And when I got older and started, selling, you, I guess easy come, easy go. It came
Yeah.
fast, it went fast, and towards the end, um, our plug, he wanted to get him busted. He got so our plug was based out in Dallas. So how it worked was it'll come across the border, and go through McAllen, it'll go to Houston, went to Waco, and went to Dallas. Then whatever, I guess as it's going, as the drug is getting trafficked, is getting dropped off. A portion here, a portion here, a portion here, a portion here. Then we'll get our little cut. These guys freaking had semis
Yeah.
and trucks coming in, and they'll just throw us, the bottom of the barrel. That's pretty much because you know how it is. The
Yeah.
cartels are $1 billion, enterprise.
Industry. Yep.
So, although we were making a lot of money, these guys were, bringing in millions. So, our plug wants to get him busted. As soon as he got busted, we already knew that it was time to look for a new plug, but we didn't have time to do all that. We wanted moving from our old trap house. We moved around the corner to a new trap house because that spot got really hot. Stupid, still in the same street. It was just around a corner. So our house was on the main road, and we wound up moving down this way and around a corner. Still in the same area, but in our minds, we thought the cops will never find us here, or the people that we're beefing with, they'll never find us here. But it's a small ass neighborhood, or not a small ass neighborhood, but it's the hood, so everybody
Yeah.
knows
Yeah.
about everybody.
Everybody.
Cops could pick up on somebody like that. So we move into this new, this new trap house. We're there maybe not even a month, and the task force winds up kicking our door in. And thank God I was not there because I just got out from county, and I just got done beating a case when I was 16 years old. I committed a crime. We were gang banging. I wound up pulling a pistol out. I wound up pulling a pistol out on somebody in self defense, and but the people who told the cops first, the cops took their side of the story. That's how it is, you know. I mean, it's the first one who tells the cops, and unless you don't have a good lawyer, which I didn't have, the cops are going to automatically believe that person. The court is going to believe that person because they went to the cops first, So
And especially if both people are involved, it's kind of like, who do I believe? Because it becomes, like I said, it was your normality. I'm sure cops see this all the time.
yeah,
One gang fighting with another gang, and a drive by here and a drive by there. I'm sure they see it on a daily basis.
yeah, yeah, you're right. And it was something normal for the cops to see. And when that happened, they wound up arresting me for it. Thank God I beat the case. I was in county for a few months, and while I'm in there, somewhere down the line, the people they didn't want to go testify against me. If they would have testified against me, I would have went down and did 5 to 10 years off the back. But they didn't testify against me. My dad, surprisingly, he wound up. My stepdad, he wound up getting some money together, and he surprisingly he used his money because he was really selfish. I mean, he loved us, had a heart for us, but he was always first. He wound up throwing $1,800 on a bond attorney, and the attorney wound up getting my case dropped to a misdemeanor, and wound up just doing time served. So I was really surprised that my dad did that for me. That's probably like the one of the
Times that he backed you up, you could say.
yeah, most I guess
Yeah.
heartwarming things that I couldn't believe. Whoa, like you're bailing me out, pops? Damn, why?
Yeah.
And he said, and he told me because I didn't want to see you go down that road to
So
that prison.
in all this track, you were in and out of jail, right? And you kept getting more involved in the gangs. When do you think it was the point where you said, no more, or this is not the life that I want, or that you started getting in serious trouble?
Well, when I got out of jail, I got worse. I started working for the Los Zetas. Got worse.
Yeah, I found a different plug.
Found a different plug, but it
Same
didn't
cartel.
last long. It didn't last long because our house, our trap house, got busted by the task force. We moved to a new spot. We're not even there a month, but I wasn't at the spot when they kicked the door in. I thank God because if I was in that house when it happened, I probably would have got all the blame because all those other people there, they didn't have, they had a clean record. Me
You were
being
already in the system.
exactly. So it's crazy how God works, and I'm a true believer that there's a higher power out there, and I'm a true believer, and God makes things work, for
At that
your
time when
glory,
you were gang banging and dealing and everything, did you have faith? Did you attend church, or did you know there was a higher power?
Oh yeah, yeah. I grew up in church, believe, still believe in God, still believe in Jesus. My mom, she would always try to make sure, we were in church every Sunday morning, even when I was game banging. I'll go to church hungover, and because she would say, "Hey, it's Mother's Day, I want you there." I'll party all day Saturday, no sleep, go straight to church, and just smelling like a straight bar. And I'll sit there with her, and it's your mom. You want
Yeah,
at least
yeah.
make
You
her
want to make
happy.
my yeah.
You know how it is. So yeah, so I've always believed in God and always believed in Jesus, and I think God, he kind of, or I guess God kind of like planned it out this way to where I wasn't at the house when it happened. So how it happened was my mom calls me. She says, "Mijo, I got your food ready. Come eat some dinner. Bring you and two homeboys with you, or bring whoever with you." I said, "Cool." I had two homeboys there. It's five of us, right? I had two homeboys there. Three of us went to my mom's house. Two of them stayed there, and they rode like two or three blunts. I told them, "Don't smoke these blunts until I get back, 'cause I want to be back in maybe 20 minutes. Just wait." They said, "Okay." So sure enough,
As soon as we walk inside my mom's house, we hear this big old boom, and automatically I think we're getting shot at. So I go to my mom's room and I started looking for a pistol that I had there. And she says, "No, mijo." She said, "They popped your house." I said, "Really?" She said, "Look." So I just walked to my mom's front yard and kind of just peeked over a little bit because she lived right around the corner from us. Peeked over a little bit, saw in like the little gap, and I saw these two big ass army trucks just running by my house. And after that, I went on the run for a while, went somewhere else. But then you would think after doing that, I'll finally get my life back together. I didn't. I just got worse. I started robbing other drug dealers to get more money. I started, breaking into people's houses. I started just to, because I was broke. I didn't have no money. The only thing I knew how to do was go rob. So then I started robbing other drug dealers, you know. Then just kept on getting worse and worse and worse. Then it got to the point to where I was about 20 years old. I got shot. I got shot 2 times. I was at a party, house party. I got shot 2 times. And even at that moment, the first thing I started doing, as soon as I was able to get out the hospital, I started selling again. Started selling again. Had people coming over to my house, to my mom's house at that, and she didn't know I was selling. She thought people were going over there to go see me. You know, I'm sitting there, laid up in bed. I was in a wheelchair for about 8 months, 7 months. I couldn't walk. Got shot in my leg and my arm, so I wasn't able to walk. So I was always laying in the bed. She thought people were coming over to see me until she walked in and I was handing some weed over to a customer and she finally said, "Hey, you got about 2 weeks to get your shit and get out." I said, "Okay, cool." So you would think after everything that I just mentioned, from the time I was like 16, 17, from gang banging, house getting kicked in, all these shootouts, you would think me getting shot, me going to jail, catching a case, all this, you would think I would finally snap back into it. But nope. As soon as I moved out my mom's house. That's where the drug dealing. I wasn't game banging no more. I mean, I was still active. I was still around, but you'll never catch me holding a damn pistol because I got shot. I said, "Man, screw this." I said, "Man, I damn near died." I said, "What the hell?" I said, "Man, I'm gonna just stay low." But I told myself I need to take it a step further, and that's what I started doing. As soon as I moved out from my mom's house, I moved in with a homeboy, and it freaking just skyrocketed again. I met a new plug. I was constantly selling again, kept on getting, and this time I'm by myself. I started by myself for roughly about a year and a half, just by myself. Then my homeboy, he got deported, and he came back, and he came back as a made guy. He came back as a made guy, a made guy from the Michoacan cartel. So now, not only do I got a new plug, but he's also my homeboy for my gang. So it's like, hey, a double win. And then I'm getting my stuff from him. Then I met this homeboy from high school. He had a family in California. They were a California syndicate to where they had this top A Kush Dro, type weed, top level stuff. And then I started working for another crime syndicate. You know, so for a whole year and a half, Diana, I was just doing it by myself. I was just slanging with me, and my homeboy. I was getting my stuff from my homeboy, and that was it. Then after that, I started working with my other homeboy. He was getting shit from California. He was getting it mailed in, and we will turn around and sell it, send the money back. Then I'm working for this other syndicate, and it was a big love triangle. And I'm not talking about like a love, triangle where everybody's in bed with each other, but I'm talking about a love triangle where everybody was beefing with each other, and I was just caught right in the middle of it. My Michoacan cartel homeboy, I was getting a few keys of ice from him, and I was pushing anywhere between 2 to 4 keys of ice from him, and I'll sell them. He'll front them to me. I'll turn around and bring him the money. My homeboy that had the California syndicate, he was getting Dro or Kush or Zaza or whatever, what kids call it nowadays, Zaza. And the same thing, we're getting 50 to 70 pounds a week. through the mail. We'll sell them, turn around, wash them, or I'm not wash them. We'll turn around, sell them, flip them, send the money back. The other local crime family I was messing with, I was getting all my um, lower grade weed from because I still had a lot of customers that bought just regular weed. So my homeboy from my gang started beefing with one of the crime families out there. They started beefing. Then my other homeboy that I used to get, the weed from California from, his family started, not trusting him with the money. He wound up owing his family some money, and just all this stuff started happening. And on top of that, I started using meth. In the last year, I was out there selling. I never touched meth. Always been around it. Always watched my homeboys do it. Heroin. Always watched, everybody, just do it. It was never my thing because I saw what it did to my family. I would walk in and I would watch my older cousins or uncles or friends. I would walk into the room and watch them shooting up with the needle. So me growing up watching that, I seen the effects of it. I never touched it. I never wanted to do anything. Weed was my drug. Weed and pills. The last year I started doing meth, and I didn't want to do meth. I just the person that I was selling meth with, he put it to my lips. Said, "Hey, I need you to hit this with me. I need you to smoke it with me." He said because every time you're falling asleep at the house, I would go to his house and sell meth. I would go out there and sell, a few pounds of meth. I would pass out on his couch with a pistol in my hand because I didn't know who the hell he was bringing in. It was his house, but I would just fall asleep. I would smoke, take bars, fall asleep with a pistol in my hand. And he said, "Hey, you're scaring away some of my customers and you're scaring, my homies that are here. They're thinking that one day something might flip in your brain and you might just get up and start shooting people." And I told him, like, yeah, that's exactly why I got a gun. Just in case if you guys start flipping on me, I'm prepared. He said, "Man, you're making us worry." He said, "Here, just hit this." I said, "No, I'm good." He said, "Just hit this and you just stay up with me one night." Did it that first night. I loved it. Wound up doing just a 20 bag one night. In about 2 months, I was partying off a whole 4 ounces of meth in a freaking week. Partying. Me and my homeboys would just smoke it. Just smoke a quarter pound of meth, just all of us staying up 7, 8 days. And I got bad on meth. And my cartel homeboy from Mexico, he didn't care as long as he had the money. He was doing it with me here and there. Some other people in our gang was still doing it. My California homeboy, he didn't care. He was doing it with me. But the crime family that I was messing with out there in DFW, they had an issue with it. They didn't like it. They only wanted weed, nothing else. They didn't like when one of their workers was doing a drug
Yeah,
that,
that they were dealing with, because a lot of people say you don't consume your own merchandise.
yeah, they didn't mind weed, but when they found out that I was doing meth, and I think probably because I didn't, I wasn't getting it from them, which they knew I was working for two other people. But once I got on meth, um, I started to realize a lot of different, situations where it wasn't sitting right with me, and one of my homeboys from Fort Worth that I was selling meth with, he tried to go rob me. So I had, 8, 9 guys at my house, or at my trap house one time, all strapped up, waiting for these guys to come. They never showed up to my house, so me and my homies went to their house, and we freaking did some stuff to them. And they wound up calling me, hey, they're leaving me voicemails, just a whole big, you know, love triangle was going on. I guess a lot of beef was going on. I was on meth. A lot of little situations were happening, and I remember what brought me over here was me getting into a big mess out there to where I told myself either I want to die here or I want to be in prison for a really long ass time. And sure enough, I moved out here, and that same week that I moved out here, all hell broke loose out there in Fort Worth and in Arlington.
You never did prison time?
And no, No, I caught a case when I was 17, caught a case when I was 20 for a gun charge. And the people that were supposed to be on the stand and testify against me, they never showed up. So I'm thankful that like I'm really fortunate that I didn't do any prison time because all the shit that I was doing, I should have been in there, a handful of times.
And then you moved to your current location because were you running away from something, or you just because you wanted to get out of it? You were just it was just way too much for you already, and that's just not the life you wanted.
Yeah, I just wanted to run away and get away from that lifestyle as much as possible because deep in my heart, I've always wanted to do something, good. I always wanted to be a good dad, a good husband. I always wanted to have that picture family, or I guess that family picture, that you see in, Walmart. I always wanted to have that family. I couldn't do that out there. I still got homeboys that are out there that are in their 40s that are still doing the same damn thing. And I tell myself, why? Like there's more to life than just staying in the hood and being, respected by, the hood. So I came, moved away, and I never went back. It was crazy how it happened. Just one week, I was doing everything that I mentioned. Very next week, it was hard. It wasn't easy. But very next week, started going to church. Started gradually, getting my toes wet out here. Started doing Bible studies. Started to do men's men's meetings at the church because I didn't know how to properly be a man. I didn't know how to properly love a woman, how to properly be a dad. I didn't know how to be a good civilized citizen, you know? Because me growing up, a man on the streets is what is different than what the Bible says, how to be a man, how to love your wife, love your kids, you know, hold on records is wrong, you sacrifice, your wife's, you sacrifice your household for your own sake. So I didn't know how to do none of this, Diana. I came out here. I got, um, I guess, God put some good, godly man in my life to make sure that I got to the next level that I needed to be. Then, I wound up going to Bible school, wound up, being part of a ministry for 8 years. And all of that, it really helped me and shaped me into the man I am today. Because without that, having a good foundation, just a good foundation can set up your future for generations to come.
Yep.
And I'm thankful that I was able to get a good foundation, that God was able to plan everything out to where
Break that cycle for your
break.
children.
Yeah, yeah,
For break that cycle, because like you said, you are generations and generations. You knew that that's not what you wanted for your children anymore.
yeah.
And for you to do that, you had to really walk away.
I did.
And who is
Thank God.
Jacob now?
Now, if you ask me or ask my wife, I bet you'll get two different answers. Or ask my boss, he might say something different. But I don't forget where I come from. I don't forget, what brought me here. That I guess those two things right there keeps me humble. It keeps me going. It keeps me just being content with what I have. Um, I don't forget where I come from at all, and I'm a good worker. If you ask my kids, especially my daughter, she'll say that I'm a good worker. One day she told me, she said, "Daddy, is there anything good that you're doing that besides just working?" And that really, touched me because she already sees that. So now I'm starting to set the standard for her. Like, hey, I'm not going to, I'm setting the standard for her to where when she gets older, she's going to, think about it and say, I'm not going to settle for anything less than what I saw my dad do,
Exactly.
and I want to hold her to that. And same thing with my son. My son looks up to me as, my son. He's a little bit more streetwise, which kind of it makes no sense because he's not from the street, you
Yeah, yeah,
know.
yeah.
So, but he's very streetwise and he's very, knowledgeable on what goes on around him, which is kind of, it's crazy because at his age, I wasn't that wise, But if you ask my son who I am, he would say that's my daddy, that's my number one guy, that's my hero, you know.
And the street that your son is seeing is not the same street you were seeing,
Yeah,
which is
totally
impact.
different.
Yeah, totally different.
Yeah, and I'm raising some game changers. And if you ask my wife who I am, she would say I'm a loving husband. She would say, that's a guy right there that I could lean on when something is not going right. I know I could go to him. I got all these titles, but when it comes down to it, I'm the same person. I'm dad. You know, I'm Jacob. I'm I'm Babe. I'm the supervisor, at my job. But all of that right there makes me who I am now. But it took me going through all these trials and tribulations to get to this point. If I didn't go through, any of that stuff when I was a kid or young, and if I didn't come out here at the perfect time, a perfect, place where God set everything up for me, then there's no telling where I would be at today. Because, when I was living out there in the city, I didn't get married. I was still with my high school sweetheart. We've been together, I don't know, been together for a long time. We've been knowing each other pretty much our whole lives now.
And she's your current wife.
Yeah, yeah, got one, and
Yeah.
that's all I need.
Yeah.
They're too expensive.
Yeah. I always say you just need one good one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
too expensive, And but we were dating out there in the city. We moved to West Texas, and that's where we got married, and where we got discipled, and that's where we had kids at. And now I look back and I tell myself I'll never raise my kids out there in the city at all. I'm not saying that you can do it, but just me personally, I wouldn't want to raise my kids out there because I remember clearly sixth grade babies. Sixth grade was at like 12, 13 years old, maybe 10, 11. I remember sixth grade, this girl was walking around pregnant. In sixth grade, a baby.
Yeah.
And I told myself, where the hell are the parents at? And me coming out, just staying away from the city keeps me in line, keeps me focused. It keeps me wanting to do something more rather than what I grew up, watching and seeing.
And temptation is huge. Temptation, what I'm trying to say is in a bigger city, you have more access, easier access to a lot of things that children in smaller towns or, different schools don't have
Yeah.
access to. Like I grew up in a very small school. I can tell you, but I counted fights, but then I talked to other people, we're the same age, and fights for them were a normal thing for them, exchanging drugs was a normal thing for them. So it does make an impact in the future of your children, and you made that wise choice because I'm sure it was hard for you to get civilized into a life that you did not grow up in. You had to learn to work, to be a good man. And I'm sure there was a lot of times that you were like, man, if I could just go back to this life, make all this money, and then make better choices.
Yeah.
Did it ever cross your mind?
Is there enough time to say it? Like, is there enough time? Well, look, back in 2020, I damn near relapsed. Back in 2020, when COVID happened, all that was going on. I lost my job. Um, I didn't. I was at rock bottom, and it was right prior. It was maybe 8 months before I got my CDO. I remember I was talking about it, with you a few times. Me trying to get my CDL, and just all these hurdles that I had to go through to get it. And back in 2020, I got in contact with a old connect out there, in Fort Worth. Haven't talked to him, about 5 years. I always kept in touch, but he just kind of went ghost. I talked to him, and he tells me, "Hey, I'm the man now. I'm the made guy now." And as soon as he said that, I already knew what he meant. I saw him, and he just looking at him, you could tell, he just smelled like D-boy off the back. So he's talking to me, blah blah blah. Mind you, um, I'm broke, and he throws me like a few $100, you know,
again, temptation. He pulls out this big ass water cash. He takes both my kids out shopping, drops, you know, I think he drops like 600-700 bucks on, my kids just like nothing. And I'm sitting there, and I'm thankful for it, but I'm sitting there looking at it. I said, man, this is tempting. So I start working, right, for this company here locally. And I start talking to this one guy, and we were just talking about, just where he's from, where I'm from, this and that. And he said, yeah, he said, I sell, weed right now. And I said, okay, cool. I said, what's a pound of Kush or Zaza going for? He said, it's going for about 2,400 right now, 23 out here. I said, really? He said, yeah. I said, I got a plug out there in Fort Worth. I said, if I get it for you for 1,500, I said, would you want to get some? Mind you, I'm broke, and this is 2020, just 4 years ago, Yeah, 4 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
That temptation is always there. And he said, yeah. He said, I'll get some money together. I call my boy, and my boy says, man, he said, I'll give them to you for, like 600 bucks. I said, damn, I can make easily 10 grand off the back just being a middleman, and my coworker at the time, he told me, yeah, if it goes right, he said, we could be doing this on a weekly basis. In my head, 10 grand times 4 weeks, that's 40K. I said, cool. I could just do this for a few months. And now that I'm older and smarter, I could just save that money, stash it, get a house, invest, go to CDL school, pay off this loan, pay off that loan. You know how it is when you get
Solve your
older.
problems.
Yeah, you solve your problems. Exactly, Diana. And I said, okay, cool. So I lied to my wife. I said, hey, I need to take your car to work because I need to, because like my truck is not working. Her car is more low key. I called her into work. I called my homeboy out there in the city the day before. I said, hey, can you still get this for me? Blah, 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 this and that. He said, yeah, come through. I got you. So he was going to just front it to me. I was going to come out here, do the drop off, go back, you know, real fast, real simple, a quick 10,000 bucks just for, maybe 3 hours worth of, driving. That day, I go out of Fort Worth. He's not answering my calls. He's not answering my text messages. I don't know where he's at. I'm calling, a few other homeboys that we grew up with. They said he went MIA. They have no idea where he's going or where he went to. So I come back out here empty handed, called into work, you know.
More mad.
Yeah, I said, damn, not only did I miss a day of work, I just lost, a whole day's pay. But not only did I spent 40 bucks in gas, they just put me in the
Mm-hmm.
hole. I was pissed, I was mad. Then I found out like the very next week he calls me and said, man, the DEA wound up busting me, dude. He said they wound up busting me and they wound up, taking everything and they found a lot of things that, I'm about to go do some federal time for. As soon as that happened, Diana, I take that as a sign from God. It's like, hey, what the hell are you doing, Jay? I already took you out of that life several times, kept you on a straight, narrow path for damn near, 8, 9 years, and you're going to turn around and do this again? This is your last final warning. I took that as a sign from him telling me that. And I really felt those words I just said, that came from the Lord right there, that, hey, what the hell is wrong with you? Why? Because the Bible says that he'll correct those that want to do good. That if you want to go on that straight, narrow path, be ready for that correction and that he will talk to you really stern. He'll talk to you. God will talk to you like a father. He will talk to you in a way to where you understand. He does that to everybody. And he talked to me that day, what the hell are you doing? Why are you trying to go back? I saved your butt countless times, and look, you're that close to being at the wrong place at the wrong time. And look what happened. As soon as that situation happened, I said, all right. I said, he got my attention. I said, what do I need to do? Went to CDL school. It was like supposed to be a 8 week course. Yeah, 8 week course in CDL school. I got it in 5 weeks. Passed my test the first time. Started driving trucks in a matter of me getting my CDL, and you know this because your family, is full of drivers. You know, just having that license could bring your family from being in a poor household to up into a middle class really simple in a matter of a few years. And that's exactly what happened. Was 1 year, I was bringing in $28,000. Very next year it went up to 50. I said, what the hell? I said, I did not know you can make this much money doing a CDL. I remember talking to you about it. I said, man, I'm driving like 15 hours. I'm tired, been up all night. He said, yup, that's part of it.
Yeah.
That's part of it. And and went from making 50K to making to what I'm making now. And I told myself, man, I'm blessed.
Yeah.
I'm blessed. And now I still got my CDL now, but I'm not driving now. I'm a superintendent for like a multi-billion-dollar construction company. And in my head, I told myself, I'm not qualified for this stuff. I told myself, why am I here? And I get reminded, hey, I'm here for a reason. I'm here to,
In your head, you're not qualified, but in God's eyes, you were qualified
amen.
the moment
That's
you
good.
decided to walk away.
That's good.
You know.
Yeah, that's good.
So, what is Jacob afraid of now? What is your biggest fear right now? As an adult man, has lived both sides of the world, you can say. What are you afraid of?
Honest answer, I'm afraid of two things. The first thing I'm afraid of is failing. Um, that keeps me going, but it's also in the back of my mind. I live every day at my job like if I'm going to fail because it keeps me on my toes to be better. Because I don't want to fail. If I fail as a provider, then I failed as a man and as a husband. That's how I see it as. And the second thing I'm scared of, Diana, I know as believers, we're not supposed to be scared of this or even afraid of it, but I'm really afraid of death
So am I.
because I guess, I know, right? I just don't want to leave. I don't want to die and I have nothing left for my kids or my nephew or my cousins. Like, if I die, God has the last say, but if I die, if I'm 70 or 80 years old and I want to have some wealth to where I'm able to leave to my kids, my grandkids, my nephew, my great nephew, my cousins, their kids, I want to have some wealth to where I guess, I want to make sure my life is completed and make sure that my family is well off because if I was to die right now, I would worry that my wife's going to be struggling. Now she has to raise kids in a single parent household. I know the damage and the effect of that. So I guess that's one thing that worries me is death,
Yeah.
just for those situations.
What would you tell the younger Jacob?
I thought about this question before, and one thing I would tell to my younger self is listen to good advice when it comes from a good person because they know what they're talking about and that they're there at their way of living for a reason. So take that advice and not just say, okay, yeah, I know what I'm doing and not be arrogant about it. Take people's advice a lot more. I think I was 22, 23 years old, and I finally started to listen to people older than me because I said, man, I want to be where he's at. And I told myself I need to start listening and learning and just be humble. So I would tell my younger self just those words: be humble and listen and take people's advice when it comes from a good person that has good intentions. That's what I tell myself.
And which is amazing because this story, I feel like it's such a powerful story for the younger generation right now to know that there is change out there. That just because you had a bad childhood or because you come from a broken home, there is always, every day that you wake up is an opportunity for a new day and that you can walk away and that you can change. It's a big blessing that you're here able to tell your story because I'm sure a lot of your friends or your homies didn't make it. I know a lot of people wish they could sit in this chair and talk about their testimony and be alive.
I'm I'm blessed. I'm very blessed to be sitting here with you and just be able to just to encourage somebody that hey, just because you grew up in a broken environment, don't become a statistic. You know, the world may label you as a statistic because you grew up in a single parent household or because you grew up poor, but just because the government or the world label you, just because they put that label on you, does not mean that's who you are. You know, and that's what I had to learn from me being in my mid 20s. That hey, I beat the statistics. I'm not a number no more. And what can I do now to empower not only my kids, but all the information or experience that I have, how can I pass it on to the next generation? That's what really made me go into being a youth minister for quite a while because I told myself there's a lot of broken kids. Even in small towns, there's still a bunch of broken kids. And I
And
told
even in good
myself,
families,
yeah,
even in good families, even if you had a great childhood, there's always life is two roads, and
yeah,
there's always going to be that time that you go into the wrong road, but you can always go back to the right road. You
exactly.
know, and we need these examples. We need, because some people, when you were younger, you didn't know there was another life that you're living right now that existed.
Yeah,
You know, you were in
exactly.
survival mode, you grew up in your environment, and that's kind of all you knew.
Exactly.
So it's important, and part of the reason why I do this podcast is because of that. Because there is light at the end of the tunnel. There is, you can change, and just because you're 3, 4 generations back, we're different than yours. You know, that doesn't mean you have to keep going.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
it's a big impact. You know.
It is, and it took me all the way up until my current age, or even back in 2020, to finally realize, hey, I'm here for a reason, and anything that I'm doing, I need to make sure that I just pass it on to the next person, and I have too. I've helped out, not only men, but I helped out, youth, just to not only share with them my testimony, but I noticed when you actually share life with them, you walk with them side by side, that makes a bigger impact. And I told myself, the moment that I see, back when I was doing, church and I was a youth minister, I told myself the moment that God draws me near to a broken kid, then it's my duty to make sure that I walk with this kid as long as he's here because no telling where he's going to be at next. And I want to make sure that the little time I have with him, that God places together, that I'm able to impact his life. And there's been countless of kids where I'll run into at a store and they'll just come up to me and they'll just give me a big hug, or they'll come up to me and they'll call me like Pastor J or Brother J, and I'll just sit there and talk to them and just catch up with them, But then, but be honest, I forgot about those times that I prayed over them or I impacted their life. I forgot about those times, but the fact that they still remember and they'll come up to me, that really makes me, it just feels good. Like, hey, what I did wasn't for granted. Me sowing into you, me praying with you. I could tell it left a good effect because you noticed me from the other side of the store and you came over here. Because kids grow up and you
Yep.
don't recognize them. But these kids, they'll recognize me, they'll come up to me, they'll give me a big hug, and I could tell that I left a good mark on them,
And
you
this is
know.
a perfect example of your past does not define you.
Exactly.
You know, a lot of people, they're like, oh, well, he's an ex-felon. He's an ex-gang member. Yes, I'm an ex-gang member, but look at me now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I can be an example to a lot of kids. I can be an example to my kids, yourself. So,
Yes, ma'am.
it's a big blessing. And thank you so much for sharing your story. And I
Thank
pray
you.
that, it goes out to a lot of small generations right now, that they see it and that they know that there is a change. And just because you're in that environment, but you can always get out, there's always help, and I'm sure if somebody reaches out to you, you're going to be there to,
Always.
talk and share your story and say, look, I got out of it. So can you.
Always.
Anything else you want to add before we
No, ma'am.
close out?
Just thank you so much for allowing me to be here. I know we've been talking about it for, quite some time already.
Yeah.
And I'm just really thankful that, I was able to be here with you and your crew. I thank you guys just for allowing me to be here.
Well, I appreciate it. And if we can change one kid's lives with the podcast, I'm
Amen.
happy with that. So,
Amen.
all right. Well, thank you so much for your time,
Thank you.
Jacob.
Thank you.